Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into another episode of the Money Insights Podcast, where we talk all things money and business. My name's Christian Allen, and I'm here with my co-host, who you all know as Rodney the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what's up, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am good, other than the dreary weather outside. But okay, so it's ugly outside, but I'm feeling good in here.
Good. Nice and warm.
Nice and warm.
In your heart.
Yeah, we've got like the Christmas tree up, a fireplace going.
Yeah.
It's just, see, so that's like the positive, just kind of the ambiance you can create during that holiday season.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm living that up.
Nice. I like it.
Okay, Rod, I got to say congratulations. I don't know if you mentioned this. You did mention this on a recent podcast, but we recorded it yesterday, to be fair. But anyway, congratulations on your son, Spencer, who graduated basic training.
Yeah. Yep. He made it.
He made it. How was it? Did he say he like barely made it, or did he like cruise through?
Well, I mean, he would say there were times he struggled, but it's actually really cool to see like how much confidence and just like he stands straighter. Anyway, not that he was a slouch before, but no,
he's already being whipped into shape.
Really good for him. Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
And now moves on to the next step and kind of builds on that. But yeah, thank you for saying that.
And he wants to be a tank mechanic or something, right?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, well, that's super cool. Rod, today we're going to talk about the importance, maybe not the importance. We are going to talk about the importance of valuing a business. We're also going to talk about the importance or the value of owning a business. Okay, So this is a topic I've been thinking about a lot. And yesterday you did a great Facebook Live specifically on business valuations. So we thought it would be a good chance to build on that concept of how do I actually value a business and kind of what does that look like? And then, but it also made me think like, man, in just having a business, owning something, owning things is just so incredibly powerful. So I thought maybe what we'll do is we'll start with that. It is, Rod, the first of our 10 high-income money hacks. Yep. And it's true, Rod. Business owners really do get all the breaks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm excited to get into it because on the high income money hack, we focused a lot on the tax, but we'll get into a few more things here that I think will be really helpful for people to kind of get a glimpse into.
Okay, so before we jump into the topic, all in, I've got to throw out a few announcements.
Okay.
First of all, I keep mentioning it, but I'm going to keep mentioning it. That was quite a sentence, Rod.
Yeah.
I keep mentioning it, but I'm going to continue to mention it. Okay, the first thing is the high income money hacks. So if you haven't gone to the website, go check out the high income money hacks. That'll also get you access to the member area, which is the curated curriculum that'll be built out for you based on the way you answer the investor quiz. So it's kind of this whole ecosystem that's built together to create content that's like relevant for the individual. So anyway, go check out the high income money hacks. We also have out on the website freshly the 10-step formula to financial freedom. And then finally, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, Investment Strategies for High Income Earners, we'd love you to do so. We do Facebook Lives every Tuesday afternoon. We're going to be super consistent on that. And we're committed to continuing to put out consistent and quality content that will help people go from high income to high net worth.
Yeah, and it's a good place not just to connect with us and some of those things that we're putting out, but connect with each other, a community.
Absolutely. Probably the most important, the best value from it is 100% the community. Yep. And we're excited for people. Here's the thing. We have like all of these incredibly highly successful clients. And so to be able to share their combined wisdom, like it just lifts everybody. So
absolutely.
So come check out the Facebook group. Again, it's Investment Strategies for High Income Earners. We are trying to get messages to go directly out from Facebook, but ran into a little bit of a snag. So that might lag a little bit, but if you go into Facebook groups and just look up Investment Strategies for High Income Earners, you can join it easily that way. Okay, Rod, let's get into the topic, which we kind of hit on already, but I want to just start by maybe talking a little bit about why I think owning a business is so important from a wealth building perspective, right?
Mhm.
And that's really the focal point. So there's probably a lot of reasons why someone doesn't or shouldn't own a business too, but we're specifically going to talk about the value of owning a business from a wealth building perspective. I have to put that caveat in there because we want to recognize that business ownership isn't necessarily right for everybody, and
Mhm.
it's not even necessarily right for all high income earners, right? Everybody's a little bit different in how they want to, grow and progress and build their wealth. But I genuinely believe, and this is kind of a bold statement, but I genuinely believe that business ownership is the fastest and most effective way to build, let's call it, generational wealth.
Mhm.
I think about my own business, Rod. Like, most of my, or a big portion of my wealth would be locked up in the value of our business,
Yeah.
right? Now, we've been very fortunate to bring out significant incomes, and like that's been great. But like when I look at it from a net worth standpoint,
Mhm.
well, what I've got inside my business and what I could sell the business for is a lot more valuable today than just the income alone.
Right. And that was built from, well, basically nothing, right? If you think about the way that we normally think about building wealth, investing in real estate, investing in other people's businesses, there's something there to begin with. In this case, we basically, you know, with a lot of work, blood, sweat, and tears. So again, maybe I shouldn't say from nothing, but without a starting point, without an initial value, creating value.
Well, and what's really cool about it is we started, of course, the purpose was to build an income,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's true.
And so what's really interesting is that it's almost one of those things that's been really neat in the sense that we focused on building an income, focus on building an income and serving clients, and like, while we focus on building the brand and stuff, I think the the core reason behind it was from an income perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's really unique and interesting and amazing about ownership is that you can then turn around 10 years later or 20 years later and suddenly realize that while you've been building this income, you've also built this incredible asset.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if you look at the wealthiest people in the world, they are people who built
Yeah.
something, right?
Yes.
I mean, the
Without
Waltons,
question.
again, I mean, they just generationally at this point doing that. But even, I'm a big fan of Shark Tank, and I look at any of those people who are on there, and none of them, started out, with the silver spoon in their mouth. They ground it out and then built something cool, sold it. Now they're a lot of them billionaires as a result of that, and have just continued to build, right? But it's getting to that level was about building a business or building a series of businesses.
Now, the good news, Rod, is there's a lot of ways to build a business, right? We've talked about this,
Yeah.
and even in our high income money hacks, we're emphasizing that investing in real estate is a form of owning a business, especially if
Mhm.
you're doing it you're doing it meticulously, you're building a process around it. It's 100% a
Yeah.
business. And so like it doesn't mean that it has to be, some business you start from the ground up. We had John Austinson on yesterday who talks about building franchises, like
Yep.
investing in franchises. Like there's a lot of paths to ownership, but again, just the kind of fact of the matter is that the most effective wealth building tool that exists is ownership in some way, some way. Oh, what am I trying to say here?
Way, shape, or
Some
form.
that's it. Yeah, I was thinking form or fashion too, and I was like
Oh,
combining the two. So yes, but that's just the kind of the bottom line. Okay, so Rod, I want to make sure that we hit on the tax thing, but I have a couple other thoughts before we jump into that.
okay.
One of the other values that I love about a business is that it gives you a chance in a very unique way to potentially create time and financial freedom by leveraging other people, by
Mhm.
leveraging your business, right? So you think about, again, in a traditional W-2 situation, If I go on vacation, like I might have been able to build up some vacation hours, but I don't have the ability to leave for 6 months and have my business still paying me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
Right.
just not how it works. And so one of the things that ends up being really unique is that um, as you build a more mature business, um, you have the chance to be as involved with it. But if you build the right type of business, then you could even step away from it and
Mhm.
still have not only value in the business, but have it creating income for you. So really
Right.
unique from that perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's, and we'll get into this a little bit later in terms of value business and potentially, selling it. But even without selling it, like you said, you can create some of that time freedom for sure.
Okay, Rod, why don't you hit on the tax, kind of the at least high level tax benefits, and then we'll jump into some of the stuff you started getting into yesterday in the Facebook Live. We'll talk about like actually how to value a business.
Yeah, and this one gets back to the idea that, especially for high income earners, tax becomes the biggest expense in a large way, right? Much larger than anything else. Uh, but for a business owner who also is a high income earner, it just gives you a lot more avenues to where you can create deductions, create really just kind of taking advantage of what the tax code offers to pay less tax. The income didn't change. You still earned a lot of income, but you kept more of it because you were able to build that into with the business, with the deductions that you can get. And so it's harder to find that kind of thing for a W-2 earner. There are a few things that W-2 earners can do, but for a business owner, there are a plethora of opportunities.
Well, and that's kind of the reason we continually say that the tax code is just a giant list of tax incentives that are generally for business owners,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So anyway, if you can like learn to look at it that way, it'll have a huge impact. And again, this could be in your real estate business that you're investing in outside of your traditional W-2 job, and you can still create a lot of those same kind of benefits. Again, if you just start looking at the tax code as a series of incentives that you can take advantage of when used appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Is there anything else we want to hit on from a tax perspective?
I feel like we hit on tax a lot in from a lot of different angles. So I didn't come, in the outline building out a lot of like specific ideas. Go to the high income money hacks. There are a bunch over there that'll
Yep.
help you on that as far as specific things. But again, just the idea that if you have a business and you have the right CPA that can help you be creative and look for ways to save tax, man, it's just a lot of opportunities.
Okay, Rod. So let's move into the business valuation component. So
Yeah.
the first question that I think comes to mind is why in the world is it even important to know the value of your business? Well, I'll just hit on it from my perspective, and then I'll let you start teaching us about, some of the ways that we actually create business valuations.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, one of the primary reasons, again, it kind of goes back to the biggest asset you own. Well, my biggest asset is the business.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, if there comes a point in time where I want or I'm deciding, okay, we're going to sell, let's say we decided to sell the business at some point, it would be really critical to know what it's actually worth,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, that seems really obvious, but I think it's important to not just know in the moment, but to periodically kind of get an updated view of what that is. And so even if you don't go out and have an expert valuation done, it's certainly worthwhile to know at least the basic ways that you can value a business, because again, you're talking about your biggest asset potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And when that sell happens, for a lot of people, that's what they're using to fund the remainder of their life, right?
Yep.
Every business is different, but let's just say you own a medical practice and your intention is to work and you create a big income, and maybe you put some money into retirement accounts along the way, but you're expecting to make a, $8 million sell of the practice. Well, the difference in planning could be $1 million really
Mm-hmm.
easily. just from doing some basic planning and making sure you're understanding like what that is along the way, not just
Absolutely.
in the moment. Gosh, Rod, I can't tell you how many times we've had people come to us and be like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of selling my business. What can I do from a tax perspective to like
Mm-hmm.
mitigate all these tax, this tax that I'm going to take?"
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is there's not a lot you can do when you're that far in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes really critical to get to it beforehand so you can make put the plans in place, have a strategy in mind. Because again, it could be the difference in, hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, depending on the size of your
Absolutely.
business.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind as well is that as we're meeting with people and just discussing, what their net worth is, it's not that people forget that they have a business, but I think they very much undervalue the business. And it matters. It matters when we're applying for life insurance. It matters if they're going out trying to get a loan, et cetera. And especially in a minute, we'll talk about business succession. But if you're being proactive in how you're going to transfer the business at some point to someone else, then man, if you undervalue it, then you're putting a lot of money on the table for your future, basically you're leaving it on the table. So it is important to know now, and then later when you get the actual appraisal and everything, the professional valuation done when you're selling, it all works together. But if you undervalue it now, then you're really putting yourself behind the eight ball moving forward.
The other thing that's coming to mind is, and I'm not an expert in business valuation, but I do know that the way that you actually do the valuation has a significant impact on so I've read a bunch of different articles, and as we've talked to experts in this space, like I've heard people talk about this idea that depending on the type of business that you have, you might want to value it in a specific, and when I say a specific way, I'm talking about maybe a different formula for actually creating the business valuation, right? And we're going to talk about the two primary ways. Maybe this is a good transition, Rod, to just start jumping into, while there are probably other ways in addition to these,
Sure.
we're going to talk about kind of the two primary ways or the few primary ways that a business valuation happens.
Yeah. And really if the kind of the two categories is on the one hand based on revenue and cash flow, and in the second category based on assets. And to begin with, let's start probably at the easiest place. And that's where is probably the easiest way to do evaluation and the most common that people talk about. And that's just a multiplier off of your net income.
Yeah. Well, and then the question in that is like, well, where do you start? Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
how do you know what the multiplier is to begin with? Right. So because it's different from industry to industry, in the medical kind of profession world of having a practice and that kind of thing, it's 4 to 7 times. But that's a big range, right? Like if my net income is $1 million and I'm saying 4 to 7, well, it could be anywhere between 4 and 7 million. Well, it's a big range.
Okay. So for clarity on that, Rod, you're talking about in the medical space, you're saying it's 4 to 7 times net income.
Net income.
Okay. Not revenue, net income specifically.
Right. Yep.
Which is interesting because I think like an accounting practice I've heard it's like 1.2 to 1.5 times revenue, right? So there's just like all these variations that make it a little bit convoluted.
That's true. Yep. So know the industry, know how that works. But again, then it's not even quite as simple as that. That can create a starting point.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 to 7 million or whatever, you come up with from that. But then even inside of the whole revenue and cash flow world, there are two other things that are important. Number one is profit margins, which obviously make a huge difference in terms of that value for someone coming in. Because if I'm working off of a business that has very slim margins, even though my net income is, again, let's say it's the $1 million, but I had to make 10 million of top level revenue to produce the $1 million of net income. Well, that's very different than if it was, 3 million top level to get the $1 million. right?
Yeah, you're taking on, in that situation as the buyer, you'd be taking on significantly more risk,
Right.
which
More
means you're
risk.
going to sell the business as the seller of the business. It's not going to have the same value as a business that's doing 3 million in revenue with a 70% profit margin.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, because what comes with that a lot of times is a lot of overhead costs, inventory, other things like that that help tell the story. So again, this
And a lot
becomes
more
another
work,
level. Right. Yep.
right?
Yep.
Like
To
it
get
takes
there.
a lot more people, work, time, effort, all of those things to get to 10 million than it does to get to 3 million.
Yep.
So anyway, that's an interesting example. I think that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
And then the third inside of this revenue and cash flow is, they call it discounted cash flows. That's just a fancy way of saying what is the anticipated cash flows coming into the business for the next few years. Because let's say you have a business that is on a very high growth curve. Just to make the numbers easy, let's say they're 100% growth year over year for the last couple of years, and anticipating that'll continue for the future. Well, if my multiplier off of that is based off of what's happening today, but it's anticipated that the business will double next year and double the year again after that, then all of a sudden my million is 2 million next year, 4 million the following year, 8 million. Well, all of a sudden now I'm selling at a discount if I only use that multiplier for that. So you want to look at what the anticipated cash flows are, be able to justify it, right? It has to be legit. But if you can do that, then that raises the value of your business tremendously.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Rod, we talked about the first kind of class, which we're calling revenue and cash flow. Talk a little bit about the asset side.
Yes, and on the assets, some of this would be very obvious, right? If I have the medical practice and I'm own the building that I'm in, then that has value and can be separated from the business. But in a lot of cases, it'll be packaged with it. So that's obvious. There's equipment and other hard assets that come with the business that are just a part of the processes and whatnot that come with it, and those have value as well. Hopefully, right? Like,
right, they may have value.
Yeah, and you have to
think about
be
it.
realistic about it. But yeah, if you've just run them into the ground, then maybe not. But if you've been keeping them up and replacing and all that kind of stuff, then they will. So that's one, and probably the most obvious. The second one is on intellectual property, and this one is fascinating to me because let's give an example. Let's say you have an inventor who comes up with a really cool, widget, and patents it, has all the intellectual property around it, but isn't a very good business person. They're not really doing a good job at building a business around the widget. And so it's just not really going anywhere. Well, this is a great opportunity for an entrepreneur. And especially if it's like a complementary business and you see this and you're like, man, that would make a huge difference in my own business or in being able to really make the most of this new kind of way of doing things, a new widget. You can buy, technically you're, I guess, quote unquote, buying the business, but in reality, the value is in the patent in this case, right?
Yeah.
Because it's patented, so you can't just copy it, or shouldn't just copy it. But you buy the patent and you're off and running. The inventor is better off, right? They're happier now because they were floundering anyway.
They couldn't create the business. They couldn't turn it into money.
Yep.
On their own anyway.
Yeah, and that's their strength. They'll move to the next thing, create another widget, and patent that, and move on. Keep going that way. So, so it's kind of like aligning the strengths in the right place. So, and beyond that, trademarks and technology. This is a big one. So, it's been kind of a funny thing over the last 20 years as the whole .com and apps and technology based things have come around, and the valuations on them are just become insane, especially as it relates to valuation off of the multiplier, because they could still be losing money and sell for $1 billion, right? And it's because of the technology that's there that will turn into amazing streams of revenue in the future, but just hasn't yet. And so that's obviously falls into that kind of intellectual property. And then after that, you get into like intangible assets. Customer lists are big, right? Again, regardless of how successful your business has been, if you have a solid database of people that would be valuable to someone else, then that obviously creates a lot of value. But and then stuff like mineral rights and water shares and other things, again, depending on the nature of the business. And the last one is more kind of touchy feely. It's what they call goodwill, but it's the reputation. Google reviews obviously play a part in this. Just kind of that whole brand recognition and that kind of thing, because that's enormous as well, right? If
for sure.
Regardless of, maybe not regardless of, but in addition to what you've been able to do in actual revenue, if the buying, the buyer can see, this reputation or the reviews are really good on this, not only does that incentivize them to look a little more closer at your business, but there's real value, and it actually shows up as a line item in a contract of, how much of the sale of this business is coming from goodwill, and they'll attach a number to it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that goodwill, it can be really, really powerful. Can also play against you, right? So if you are a solopreneur, let's say,
okay,
and I am the value of I do everything, all of the goodwill's in me.
yeah,
that could actually be problematic. It could be challenging to your business. On the other hand, if you can transfer that to your business, to where your business has the goodwill, the great brand, the great reputation, that's when you start to move the needle from being able to sell the business. Okay, so Rod, what happens in this is that we basically take all of these things to create what would be a business value, right? Like it's a combination of these assets that we're talking about and the cash flow components, and we bring these together to create like a business valuation that makes sense. And again, it's hard for us to give an exact, hey, do this or this or this, only because every industry ends up being so different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So it's using kind of these basic principles and then combining it with some due diligence specific to your industry so that you can come up with, the right types of values, whether it's on, the equipment or assets that you're putting out there, or whether it's on, the right kind of multiple based on the way your business is built and the industry it's built in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Rod, this was fun. Is there anything else you want to hit on in the business valuation before we just take a second and talk about, we're going to do a teaser, Rod. We're going to talk about the 5 primary ways that a business transfer takes place.
Okay.
And then, Rod, we're going to have Jerry Barrowman come on, and he doesn't even know this yet, so this is going to be news to him too. But we're going to have a mentor of ours, Jerry Barrowman, come on. He's an expert in succession strategies, and we'll kind of dig into these in a little bit more detail. Start to learn, okay, Christian and Rod are sitting there saying, hey, you guys, you need to be thinking about how to value a business. You need to be thinking ahead about strategies to move to the next generation or move out of your business. Well, where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah.
That's kind of the next step.
Yeah. And it, like you said before, it needs to be something you think of early on, because we've seen situations where people just assumed, hey, when I get to retirement age, I'll sell my business and retire on that. And it didn't always work out. One comes to mind as a client of ours who, rural Tennessee, very successful dentist in where he was. But when it came time to sell the business, there just weren't buyers looking for, again, because of a lot of different things, I'm sure, but the geography, etc. And he just really didn't end up selling it. Gratefully, he made other plans, was able to retire, and he's doing fine. But if he was relying on that, if that was his only plan, he'd still be working now in the 70s. So,
and the numbers suggest, Rod, that there are tons and tons of businesses, especially from that baby boomer generation, that just aren't getting sold. And a lot of it has to do with this planning early on. It's like people just kind of, they put their head in the sand, they work on their business, they even create something really amazing.
Yeah.
but then they wake up one day with the intention to sell it and realize it's not a sellable asset because they didn't make those tweaks along the way, right?
Right.
And so maybe they're going to have to make those tweaks and work for a few more years or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's hard to see. And even worse, some people might run into a health issue or some sort of challenge, and they now they want to sell the business, but it's not worth what it should be or could have been with just some basic, simple planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Okay, Rod, let's talk about the quick business, like kind of the primary ways that ownership transfer that we've seen. Okay, first one, pretty common, is to sell to a co-owner, right? This would be like a Rod and I situation. Christian gets burnt out. I'm like, I can't do this podcasting thing anymore, Rod. I'm out. I'm like, you've got to pay me $50 million and you can have my part of the business.
I was going to want the 50 million because I was getting old. And you were
okay. That's okay.
So...
See, the other option is Rod's 8 or 9 years older than me. He's had a few more kids and he's just old and tired. So we've got to. Okay. But that's one example. Yep. Another example could be to transfer to children, right? This happens a lot. And I think for a lot of people, this is like the hope going in. They're thinking, okay, if I could hold on to this business and go to the next generation, I'd be so excited about that. I'll be honest, Rod, I love that idea with my own business. With our business, I have no desire to sell it. And, we can talk about, there's a lot of reasons why I would love to have kids kind of come in and take over the business. Now, I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old, actually 11. He just turned 11. And whenever I bring up taking over the business, they're like, I don't want anything to do with it, Dad. And I'm like, really? This is like the thing that's, giving you all the things you got. It's not so bad.
Yeah. That's funny.
Anyway, but you could, we do see it in a lot of situations where it passes on to children. And, trying to plan on your 10 or 11-year-old probably isn't a good idea, but maybe a little early. But maybe once they get a little bit older and ready for that.
Yeah, you're just planting the seed, planting the idea.
Just planting the seed. I'm just gonna keep hitting it every couple of weeks for the next 10 years, and then it'll be voila, burned into their heads like, oh, this is just what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Co-owners, children, team members, like people that's a key employee as an example. So somebody that has had a strong impact in the business could be somebody that has an interest in purchasing it. And again, we see, I think this is a really good opportunity, especially if you're kind of in that baby boomer generation and you're finding that it's difficult to get the value of the business that you thought. One alternative could be to bring kind of in someone that you're mentoring who can then become that business and pay you instead of, you may not get this single lump sum large payout, but maybe the deal ends up being that, you're splitting the income from it for a period of time and they're buying you out over with the note over a longer period of time.
Yeah, for sure. Or another variation on this would be what's called an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, where not an individual, but as a group, they're able to buy you out and it becomes a stock or an employee owned business. So everybody's motivated. Everybody, has that ownership kind of just built into the program.
Okay. So that's the third one. You could get bought out by an outside party, right? That's what everybody thinks of when they think of a business sale. It's funny because it's probably the least common, right? These other things ultimately, just because, depending on the business and the industry, all these things, it can be difficult to sell a business if you haven't planned appropriately, and most people don't. And for that reason, having just this outside party come in is probably less common than some of these other things. But you can obviously build a business. And I think this is where the planning, well, I shouldn't say that. The planning is critical no matter what strategy you're using.
Yeah. And this one often comes in the form, we talk to clients on a regular basis who are approached by, say, private equity firm or something like that they want to keep them engaged and involved in the business, and maybe they won't even buy 100%, they'll buy a portion of it, but it is a way to kind of get that payout. The benefit of all the hard work you put into it comes out in chunks.
Rod, that reminds me, we actually had a private equity person on a few months back.
Yep.
And talked a little bit more in detail about that. So
Yep.
I can't remember the episode number, but if that's interesting to you, then look for our episode on private equity. Okay, Rod, talk about the last one.
Yeah. So the last one is just having, maybe we can talk about the sale of our spa, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So this is one, I mean, you could kind of think of it as an outside party, but it was someone who already owned a spa and was very successful, had processes in place and everything to be successful. And they bought ours to work, in conjunction. I also spoke recently with one of our clients who's been looking into Great Clips franchises, and actually is meeting with some people who are ready to retire, and they've owned a bunch of them and are selling them kind of in a group, to him as that. So anyway, a lot of different forms that this could take, but you can be creative, right? And sometimes it falls in your lap, but don't think that there's only one way to do this. Recognize that if the kid thing doesn't work out, they don't end up, coming in. Well, that's, doesn't have to mean that the plan failed. There could just be different variations.
Well, and if you have a bunch of owners, let's say it's a larger business that has multiple owners, we talked about being sold out by a co-owner, but it could be a group of co-owners, and really it could be the company, right? You're basically selling your shares back to the company, which then can get distributed to the other owners inside the ownership group. So like you said, there's just a variety of ways that can happen. Okay, Rod. So those were the 5 ways that generally we see business transfer happening. And we hit on how to value your business. We talked a little bit about why it's so important to own a business. It's been a fun conversation, Rod.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us today. And we'll see you next week on the Money Insights podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.